The opinions expressed are those of the host. The material is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute investment advice, and it is not intended as an endorsement for any specific investment. Visit crestmontpw.com for more details.
This is Alec Walker with Crestmont Private Wealth, coming to you live from our Houston Crestmont studios, cutting through the hills of the hill country out to the Bernie recording studio. As we approach the year end in 2025, I wanted to have an episode talking about money specifically, but conversations that every couple should have. I came across this interesting article from the CFP board talking about topics that couples should discuss before marriage. And as I was scrolling through and reading the article, a lot of the topics actually were pretty applicable to couples, whether they're about to get married or have been married for 30 plus years. You know, we still see couples, maybe that are closer to retirement, still may be having some issues with some of these questions. And, 1 in 4 couples say that money is their biggest relationship challenge, and 45% argue about finances occasionally. And, I'll even say from my own personal experience, my wife and I have been married for 8 years. No, I didn't have to count that on my fingers. But, every now and then as it's, a child is born and daycare expenses and job changes, there are still conversations that we have, balancing, our own financial situation. And we see this a lot as well with the clients that we work with. So I'm kind of going to break it down into 5 to 7 different topics or questions, and think about this from a perspective of a newlywed couple potentially, or a couple, like I said, that's been married for 35 years. So number 1 is, really understand the other spouse's financial personality. I think the biggest one is who's the spender versus who is the saver. And, that can have a lot of different dynamics within relationships and couples. My wife, she's definitely more of the spender. I'm more of the saver. But for my parents, my mom is more of the saver. My dad is more of the spender. So those roles they're gender agnostic. It really just depends a lot of, kind of how you were raised and what kind of environment you came from. I actually think that having different personalities from a financial perspective can actually be healthy for financial relationships. We see this a lot with our retirees. Some of them who are more of the saving mentality and have done a great job saving their entire careers have a harder time spending in retirement, and they may end up going throughout retirement not doing some of the things that they could have done had they been willing to spend more. So I think actually having a balanced approach can be helpful. Number 2, talking about what are your concerns, your money fears about finance. So especially for a couple that's just getting together, is it retirement? Is it having enough set aside for emergencies? Is there debt? Maybe it's student loan debt that one of the spouses is coming into the marriage with. And so really kind of laying out all the cards on the table, I think is really important in having a good foundation for a healthy financial marriage going forward. Next topic, and I've talked about this a little bit earlier, is what was kind of your childhood influence? And of course, this is, if you're just about to get married, this is something you're probably talking about, but maybe if you've been together for a while, it's something you really haven't delved into much from specifically a financial perspective. How were you raised as a kid to think about money can really shape what your outlook is as an adult and as a professional raising your own family. And a really good friend of mine, I remember talking to him before Kelsey and I got married, talked about him and his wife, and he described it as different playbooks. So his wife was maybe raised, they had different plays that their family ran, whether it was, money and spending or how they spent their holidays or their day-to-day lives versus what his family playbook is. And so that's something that really resonated with me as my wife and I, we got married, and we definitely ran different playbooks together, growing up. As a great example, we're here approaching the holiday season. My wife's family, Kelsey's family, is a much bigger gift giving family. Lots of presents around the tree, lots of presents around Christmas. So that's something that's really important to her and to her family. My family, on the other hand, was maybe smaller gifts, maybe kind of spending more experiences together. And so having a big stack of presents around the Christmas tree wasn't as important. So that's something that, I kind of have to balance and us together balance with each other to make sure that we are balancing each other out from a spending perspective. But just understanding those differences alone, I think can at least provide some perspective. You're listening to The Ascent with Crestmont Private Wealth. I'm Alec Walker, EVP of Financial Planning. You can reach out to us via info@crestmontpw.com or visit our website at crestmontpw.com. So we're sitting here today talking about some money talks, some conversations that newlywed couples should have with one another, but as well as couples that have been married for many years. This question is definitely going to be more related for newlywed couples. It's kind of combining finances. How do you go about structuring bank accounts and bills after you're married? And, there's some people that fully combine everything, keep things completely separate, or a hybrid approach. That is definitely a personal decision on how to approach. I'll share a few things of what I've done, what I've seen from other clients. We felt that it was very easy to just combine our own finances, share joint accounts, separate credit cards where you can still have surprises, where you can get gifts for one another where they're not seeing it on the transaction statement. That's something that's worked out for us. I've seen other clients that keep separate accounts for personal items and joint accounts for what they agree upon as shared bills that they know are going to be kind of shared amongst the household. So maybe things that they carried on their own before coming into marriage. Maybe that's a student loan. Maybe that's a car payment. Maybe those items are kept separately until the time is agreed upon. But, kind of on this same thread of combining finances, I think budgeting strategy is something that's really important to think through and talk about. And this is where I think this applies, especially year end, and people are kind of looking at what we've spent this year and planning into next year, even for retired clients who knowing what the retirement budget and living expenses is going to be is sometimes difficult. We know what money's coming in, but not always as clear of what's the money that's going out. So the way that I would categorize a monthly budget, specifically when you're thinking about setting up emergency expenses or cash flow, is breaking it simply down into two different categories, because you can get very complex. Some of our clients are detailed spreadsheet budget folks, but if you can just break it down simply into your essentials, so think about your housing, utilities, food, recurring insurance, and minimum debt payments, so like car loans, student loans, things like that. So your essential expenses that, hey, if something happened at work, those aren't going away. And then your lifestyle expenses in a separate bucket on top of that. So think of things like dining out, travel, entertainment, our subscriptions that, we all pay for. Those aren't necessarily expenses that we're going to cut, because we talk about this, Sam and I, hey, if something happens poorly in the economy, I don't think I'm going to cut Netflix. I'm maybe just not going to go out to the movies or out to eat as much. It's a little bit more affordable to stay home and just watch something on Netflix. So breaking those budgets out into two separate things and then working from there can help you zero in on what's my emergency savings goal. And then for retirees, what's my monthly expenditures? How much am I going to be needing to request from my portfolio as income when I'm no longer earning that money from my regular job? So that's, I think, something that's really important from a budgeting perspective. And then kind of the next topic and the final topic is, what are the big picture goals with your money? And again, this is a topic that's applicable to newlyweds and those that have been married. We have conversations, particularly for those that are entering retirement. We talked about this a couple episodes ago about layoffs and kind of having that identity crisis, that role of you've worked your whole career, now you're retiring. Well, what is the objective for your money going forward into the future? For couples, it could be, explore what are those shared goals that you want to have. Is it saving up to buy a new home or to remodel a kitchen or bathroom? Is it to save up for travel? Is it a goal to have an early retirement? The more concrete, quantifiable goals that you can put behind your money and your savings can help you stay that much more disciplined and consistent to hit those goals. And of course, we always encourage emphasizing documenting and revisiting those goals. And, we use our own financial planning portals and tools for our clients to run annual reports on how are we tracking towards retirement? How are we tracking towards that down payment goal? Saving those reports into their client vault so we can memorialize them to reference back to those same reports, years later to see, hey, how are we tracking? Are we getting better or have we regressed in certain areas? And so I think that's really important, not only at the onset of a relationship, but many, many years into the relationship. As you get older, maybe those goals transition more towards gifting to children or grandkids or supporting charitable organizations that are really important to you and your family. So those are conversations that I think are really important, especially this time of year. And then finally, the last topic to discuss here is the credit conversation. Speaking about credit scores. Credit scores, of course, are very important for a couple's financial health when you're thinking about major purchases like buying a home and qualifying for a mortgage. So I think it's really important to have transparency around your credit scores, exchange credit reports, discuss any issues that you have openly, and work through that with a couple and talk with an advisor like ourselves that can help you manage through those decisions. Have a debt management strategy. We've got some great tools and debt reduction consolidation strategies through Charles Schwab as our custodian that we've implemented for some clients, as well as just other kind of general financial planning principles to apply to maybe help pay down high interest credit card debt, student loan debt, maybe even high auto loan debts that I've seen recently as interest rates have risen over the last 3 years. If you're coming into a relationship with this debt or in an existing relationship with this high interest debt, there could be options out there for you to reduce this strategically and effectively. And having a plan going forward is the most important topic. You're listening to the Ascent with Crestmont Private Wealth. This is Alec Walker, EVP of Financial Planning, coming to you from the Houston office. We talked today about conversations that newlywed couples should be having related to finance and how some of those principles can apply to folks who've been married for many years. Many of you know that I'm an avid cook, love to spend time cooking. You may not also know that I also like to spend some time outdoors. My favorite way to go camping is a canoe or kayak river trip. I did that last May during my sabbatical. My dad and I did a 2-night canoe trip on the Buffalo River in Arkansas. So we're really excited. This weekend, we're going to be taking our 2 kids. Our daughter's 4, son is 2. We're going to be camping at a state park here in Texas for the first time this weekend. So hopefully they will share the same passion that my wife and I share as well. If you are a newlywed couple or just have questions about the topics that we discussed today related to financial conversations with your spouse and significant other, you can find us in Houston, Texas, or out in Bernie, Texas, our 2 office locations. If you need to reach out to us, the best way to do so would be info@crestmontpw.com, or you can reach out to me directly at alec@crestmontpw.com. I hope that everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thank you.